I was standing in line at a small bakery in Europe when an American man stepped past everyone and walked straight to the counter. The cashier politely said, "There's a queue." He smiled and replied, "I know. I just have a question." She waited. He said, "How long does the line take?" She answered, "About 5 minutes." He nodded, then said, "Okay, but I'm in a hurry." Nobody moved. He looked around, confused, and added, "In the US, if you explain your situation, people usually let you go first." A woman behind him said, "Here, explaining doesn't change the order." He frowned and replied, "That feels unfair." She said, "No, that feels equal." He stepped back into the line, still shaking his head, like he had just discovered that urgency isn't a legal category. That was the moment I realized. Some Americans don't struggle with rules. They struggle with the idea that rules don't negotiate. If you enjoy real travel stories like this, you might want to subscribe. I was working outside a small cafe in Barcelona when an American woman grabbed one of our chairs, dragged it about 3 meters away from the terrace, straight into the middle of the pedestrian street, and sat down like she'd scored a front row seat at a Broadway show. I walked over and told her the chair couldn't be placed outside the licensed seating area. She said, "This is public space. I'm allowed to sit anywhere." I explained that cafe furniture has to stay within the boundaries we pay taxes for. She replied, "Taxes don't buy my freedom. They support it." When I pointed out the legal lines literally painted on the pavement, she said paint doesn't override liberty. She even called her husband over to witness the violation. When I gently tried to pull the chair back, she clutched it like a life raft. "You can't touch my property," she said. I told her it was our property. She replied, "I've already sat on it, so it's temporarily mine." Several locals stopped to watch, because the argument sounded like a philosophy class that had gone very wrong. Eventually the police arrived and told her exactly what I had said. The chair had to remain inside the regulated zone. She told the officers they were participating in state overreach. They carried the chair back anyway. She left a review saying, "Spain hates freedom of sitting." At a canal-side cafe in Amsterdam, an American man pushed his way into the staff-only restroom, despite a sign that clearly read "Private, Employees Only." When we told him customers should use the public WC across the street, he said, "If I'm paying for food, I get restroom access." We explained that the staff restroom was literally inside the kitchen area and not permitted for guests. He said bathrooms are a human necessity. You can't restrict access to bodily functions. When we pointed to the public restroom, he replied, "I'm not paying €1 when I already paid for soup." He stood his ground like someone defending constitutional territory. We told him again that customer toilets were across the street. He said, "I don't cross streets for rights." Then he insisted universally accepted sanitation laws protected him. When asked to name one, he said, "The Geneva Convention." At this point, even tourists at nearby tables were laughing. Eventually, he tried to re-enter the private area, so staff physically blocked him. He accused us of violating ethical hygiene obligations and threatened to report us to the American embassy. When he realized nobody cared, he stomped out, shouting, "Europe weaponizes bathrooms." A friend who works in a boutique in Milan told me about an American tourist who insisted she had the right to try on clothes, even though the changing rooms were temporarily closed for cleaning. He politely asked her to wait 5 minutes. She responded, "In America, if I'm ready to buy something, you can't stop me from trying it on." He explained that Italian regulations allow temporary closures for hygiene. She replied, "Hygiene can't override consumer freedom." When he pointed to the cleaning in progress sign, she waved it away like a hologram. "That's not legally binding," she said. "Do you have an accessible version approved by regulation?" When he refused to open the changing room early, she demanded the manager. The manager repeated the exact same explanation. She accused him of violating retail equality laws and claimed that if clothing was available for some people, the staff cleaning, it must be available for everyone. The manager tried very hard not to laugh. She then dramatically held the dress against her body in the middle of the store, and asked loudly, "Does anyone here think a woman should be denied the right to try on clothes she intends to buy?" Everyone ignored her. She left, shouting that Milan had forgotten the basic dignity of shopping. On a tram in Rome, I watched an American man demand that an elderly Italian couple move so he could sit together with his wife. They calmly explained they were staying on for several stops and asked him to wait. He replied, "I paid for this ride. I have the right to sit with my family." They answered that everyone had paid. He said, "In America, if you're traveling together, seats are kept open. It's courtesy law." The wife laughed softly and said, "Not here." Offended, the man claimed public systems must prioritize passenger comfort. When the couple didn't move, he began loudly lecturing them about international seating equity. He even started filming, saying he was collecting evidence of discrimination. Passengers told him to stop recording. He replied, "I'm documenting a violation of travel rights." Eventually, the conductor approached and told him to stop harassing people. He said, "I'm the one being oppressed." The conductor calmly replied, "Sir, you are standing." The entire tram burst into laughter. He stopped recording, but continued muttering about Europeans not understanding fairness. In Valencia, an American teenager dropped his ice cream inside a gelato shop and immediately demanded a free replacement. The staff politely explained that dropped food isn't replaced unless it was their mistake. His mother stepped in and said, "He has the right to enjoy his vacation." The staff apologized but repeated the rule. She replied, "In America, any decent place replaces it for free. That's customer protection." They explained that replacing food dropped by the customer wasn't standard here. She said Europe lacked hospitality law. When they still refused, she demanded the owner. The owner said the same thing, but offered a discount on a new one. She refused and accused them of taking advantage of tourists. The owner calmly replied, "Your son dropped it." She said the floor was uneven and therefore unsafe for dessert holding. At this point, even her husband quietly walked away. She stormed out, warning other tourists not to support anti-family businesses. The shop shrugged and cleaned the floor. A lifeguard friend in Geneva told me about an American tourist who walked straight into a cordoned-off section of the lake, clearly marked for swimmers training only. When the lifeguard whistled and asked him to step out, the man said, "This is a lake, not a private pool. Nature can't be rented." The lifeguard explained the zone was temporarily reserved for an event. The tourist replied, "Events don't override natural rights." When asked again to leave, he folded his arms and said, "Show me the law that says I can't stand in water." People on the shore were already watching. When the lifeguard pointed to the sign listing restricted hours, the man dismissed it. Signs aren't laws. Laws need legal codes. He refused to exit the water until a supervisor arrived. The supervisor repeated the explanation and told him he could swim in the public section 20 meters away. He shouted, "I'm not moving because of some imaginary wet border." Eventually, police arrived by boat. He tried arguing that lakes are international waters. They told him this wasn't the ocean. He finally got out, complaining that Switzerland privatizes nature like corporations. A rooftop restaurant in Vienna told me about a couple from the US who demanded a fully booked panoramic table because they had flown 11 hours for the view. The host politely explained all terrace seats were reserved. The woman said, "You can't reserve a view. Views belong to everyone." The host offered to let them wait for a cancellation. She replied, "No. We're customers, not peasants waiting for scraps." The husband added, "In America, if something is visible, it's public domain." Several people in line rolled their eyes. When the rule was repeated, the husband began filming, narrating, "This is Vienna denying us equal access to nature's beauty." The host calmly explained they could sit inside or return later. The woman demanded the manager. The manager confirmed the policy. She argued capitalism shouldn't control sunsets. When still refused, she threatened a discrimination complaint. The manager replied, "Ma'am, the sun will set again tomorrow." They left furious, saying Europe monetizes the sky. My friend works at a bakery in Paris, where an American man demanded his baguette be warmed up. When told baguettes aren't reheated after baking, he said, "I have the right to eat food safely." The baker explained the bread had just come out of the oven. He insisted it needed to be hotter for hygiene reasons. She said reheating wasn't necessary. He claimed it was mandatory under food safety law. She explained French bakeries don't work that way. He replied, well, they should. When she refused to microwave the fresh baguette, he accused her of violating temperature regulations. She offered him a different loaf. He said he'd sue if he got sick. She replied people had eaten baguettes here for centuries. He said that wasn't an argument in 2025. He bought the baguette, walked out, then came back in to complain it cooled too quickly. She pointed to the door and said, "Perhaps America is warmer." At a small playground in Copenhagen, an American couple began photographing children playing there, none of whom were theirs. A parent approached and politely asked them to stop. They said they were capturing local culture. She explained photographing other people's children without consent wasn't allowed. They replied, "It's a public park." Public means free photography. She said privacy laws still apply. They rolled their eyes and said Europeans are paranoid about cameras. Other parents joined in, and a small crowd formed. The couple argued that if kids are visible, they're photographable. Someone called the community officer. When he arrived and asked them to delete the photos, they refused. They said, "We have First Amendment rights." He replied, "Not here." They said rights are global. He explained Danish law requires permission. They reluctantly deleted the photos, muttering that Scandinavia hates family-friendly tourism. A hotel receptionist in Stockholm told me an American group tried entering the breakfast buffet even though breakfast wasn't included in their booking. When informed, they said, "We paid for the room. Breakfast is hospitality." The receptionist explained breakfast required an upgrade. They accused the hotel of nickel and diming travelers. He said it was optional. They claimed optional fees were illegal under consumer fairness laws. When still refused, one man announced, "Breakfast is a human right." The receptionist replied calmly, "Then it will still exist downstairs when you pay for it." They demanded the general manager. The GM confirmed the rule. They tried sneaking in anyway. A waiter blocked them. The group began chanting, "Access for all." Other guests stared in silence. Eventually they gave up and left a review saying Sweden discriminates against hungry foreigners. At a hotel in Munich, an American man tried climbing onto a decorative balcony sealed off with iron bars. When warned it wasn't accessible, he said, "If it's attached to my room, I have the right to use it." The receptionist explained the balcony was ornamental, not structural. He replied, "You can't show exterior features and then restrict them." She said the balcony wasn't being advertised. He pointed to a website photo showing the facade and said that counted as promotion. She nearly laughed. When the rule was repeated, he announced he'd file a complaint for false architectural representation. He demanded compensation, claiming blocked balconies reduce airflow. She reminded him the windows open normally. He said airflow isn't the same as psychological open space. When security stopped him from squeezing a foot through the bars, he claimed he was being held hostage, on the wrong side of his own balcony. He left a review saying Germany restricts vertical freedom. I manage apartments in Berlin, and an American tenant once installed an enormous Christmas light display across half the building facade. Strings, glowing reindeer, even a waving Santa. I told him exterior modifications were prohibited. He replied, "You can't stop holiday spirit. That violates cultural expression rights." I explained it was in his contract. He said contracts can't override festive freedom. When neighbors complained, he accused them of suppressing religious celebration, even though many of them were Christian. When told to remove the lights, he demanded proof that holiday decor regulations existed. I showed him the building policy. He said policies aren't laws. I showed him the municipal code. He said laws should be optional for renters. When we removed the lights ourselves, he claimed the city was persecuting joy. He moved out early, saying Berlin lacks spiritual respect. The neighbors threw a small party to celebrate the building returning to darkness. In Zagreb, an American couple walked into a crowded restaurant with a reservation-only sign and sat at the single empty table. The waiter explained the table was booked. They said, "But no one is sitting here." He said the guests were arriving shortly. The husband replied, "Reserved seating is discriminatory. Dining should be first come, first served." The waiter reminded them, "Restaurants aren't public institutions." They looked shocked. When asked to leave, the wife demanded proof that restaurants can hold empty tables. The waiter pointed to the host's stand. She said that wasn't legal evidence. The manager repeated the request. They accused the restaurant of class segregation. Minutes later, the actual reservation arrived. A family of 8. The Americans refused to move until police were threatened. They left loudly declaring, "Europe protects chairs more than tourists." At the Acropolis, an American family tried skipping the line by walking directly toward the entrance gate. When stopped, the father said, "We bought tickets online. That means we skip lines." The guard explained online tickets still require queuing. The man accused them of false digital advertising. The guard repeated the rule. The man said lines violate visitor flow rights. No one knew what that meant. When told to return to the queue, the mother began filming, narrating that Greece punishes efficient tourists. Other travelers looked uncomfortable. When they refused again, guards escorted them to the end of the line. The father shouted, "This is tyranny over punctuality." A kid behind them whispered, "Bro, it's just a line." A hostel worker in Rome told me about an American backpacker who demanded mandatory afternoon quiet hours so he could nap. The worker explained quiet hours were only at night. The backpacker replied, "Sleep is essential. You can't limit it to darkness." The worker said hostels are social spaces. He responded, "Socializing can't override unconsciousness rights." People in the common room laughed. When the worker refused to silence everyone, the backpacker accused the hostel of violating rest equality. He demanded other guests be moved so he could nap alone. When refused, he said he'd report them for sleep abuse. He ended up sleeping on a patio chair, then complained the sun was aggressively disrespecting nappers.